Memphis, Tennessee, 1955. The air inside Sun Record studio hangs thick with cigarette smoke and desperation. A 23-year-old door-to-door appliance salesman named Johnny Cash stands before Sam Phillips, the man who discovered Elvis Presley. Cash's hands tremble slightly as he holds his guitar. He's been practicing gospel songs for weeks, certain they'll be his ticket out of poverty. But Phillips leans back in his chair, shakes his head, and delivers 4 words that will change everything. Gospel doesn't sell, son. Cash walks out into the Memphis night, rejected, his dreams seemingly shattered. He has no idea that in less than 12 hours, he'll write a song that will redefine country music forever. If you love stories about the pivotal moments that shaped music history, the overnight decisions that changed culture forever, you're in the right place. Subscribe and join thousands of music lovers who dive deep into the untold stories behind legendary songs. The mid-1950s, country music is clean, polished, safe. It's about heartbreak and honky-tonks, about lost love and Saturday nights. The Grand Ole Opry dictates the rules. Performers wear rhinestone suits. The genre speaks to Middle America in a language Middle America wants to hear. Wholesome, redemptive, familiar. Johnny Cash is nobody. He's a Korean War veteran selling Frigidairs door-to-door in Memphis, trying to support his wife Vivian and their growing family. His brother Jack, the golden child of the Cash family, died in a horrific sawmill accident when they were boys. Johnny has carried that guilt for years. Music is his only escape, his only shot at redemption. He'd auditioned with Sam Phillips with gospel songs because that's what his mother loved, what Jack would have sung. But Phillips was building an empire on raw, rebellious sound. He'd launched Elvis into stardom with music that made parents nervous. He needed something different, something dangerous. But here's what most people don't know. What happened next wasn't careful calculation or strategic planning. It was one sleepless night, one flood of memories, and one song that broke every rule country music had. Cash returns to a small apartment that night, Phillips's rejection echoing in his mind. His wife is already asleep. He sits at their kitchen table, the same table where he writes letters to his mother, where he counts bills they can't pay. The house is silent except for the hum of the refrigerator he sold to himself at a discount. He thinks about a movie he'd seen during his Air Force years in Germany, inside the walls of Folsom Prison. He'd never forgotten it. The great walls, the trapped men, the hopelessness. He'd written a few lines back then, just fragments, images that haunted him. Cash picks up his guitar. He starts with a rhythm he'd been hearing in his head, a steady boom-chicka-boom, like a train's wheels on tracks. Trains had always meant something to Cash. His father was a railroad man. Trains meant escape, freedom, the promise of somewhere else. The first line comes almost fully formed. I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling round the bend. He's not writing as himself, he's writing as someone else entirely. A prisoner, a man with nothing left to lose. A man who made the worst choice imaginable and has to live with it forever. The hours blur. Cash writes furiously, crossing out words, rewriting verses. He's channeling something dark, something country radio has never broadcast. This isn't a song about a good man done wrong. This is a song about guilt, about consequence, about staring at your own worst self. Then he writes the line that will define his career, the line people will quote for generations. I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. Even as he writes it, Cash knows it's dangerous. It's cold-blooded. It's unrepentant. There's no redemption arc, no moment where the narrator sees the light. Just a man in a cell, listening to a train he'll never board, haunted by a murder he committed for no reason at all. He builds the second verse around sound. The prisoner hears the train whistle blowing, imagines people drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. It's torture through proximity to normal life. The free world is right there, just beyond the walls, and it's moving on without him. By dawn, Folsom Prison Blues is finished. Cash has maybe slept 2 hours. His eyes are bloodshot, his fingers sore from the guitar strings. He plays it through one more time in the empty kitchen as the Memphis sun starts filtering through the window. He has no idea if Sam Phillips will even listen to it. He has no idea if it'll end his career before it starts. All he knows is that he's written something true, something that came from a place deeper than calculation or commerce. Think about a moment when you created something that scared you, something that felt too honest, too raw. Drop a comment and tell me about it. Those are often the moments that matter most, the ones we almost don't share. Cash returns to Sun Records within days. This time he doesn't bring gospel, he brings Folsom Prison Blues, along with another song he'd written, Hey Porter. Phillips listens to both, his expression unreadable behind his ever-present cigarette smoke. Then something shifts in Phillips's face. He hears what Cash is doing, this dark authenticity, this willingness to inhabit the mind of society's outcasts. This isn't the sanitized country music flooding the radio. This is dangerous. This is real. Phillips agrees to record it. The session happens fast. Cash, along with his Tennessee 2, guitarist Luther Perkins and bassist Marshall Grant, laid down the track with minimal takes. Perkins's guitar has a distinctive, sparse sound, almost haunting in its simplicity. It's the opposite of the elaborate Nashville productions dominating country music. The song is released in 1955 as a B-side. It doesn't explode immediately. It climbs slowly, finding its audience among people who recognize something in that prisoner's voice. Something about being trapped, about consequences, about the America that exists in shadows. But here's the deeper truth. Folsom Prison Blues does something revolutionary. It repositions the outlaw, the criminal, the rejected, as worthy of empathy, worthy of spory. Cash doesn't excuse the murder in the song. He doesn't romanticize it, but he humanizes it. He makes you feel what it's like to be that man, to have made that choice, to live forever with that moment. Country music had always flirted with rebellion, but it was the rebellion of heartbreak, of drinking to forget. Cash was introducing a different kind of rebellion, moral complexity, psychological depth, the uncomfortable truth that sometimes people do terrible things, not for grand reasons, but for no reason at all. This is why this channel exists, to explore the moments when artists broke the rules and changed everything. If you want more stories like this, stories that go beyond the surface and dive into the creative choices that shape music history, hit subscribe. You won't regret it. The song establishes Cash's identity. He becomes known as the voice of the forgotten, the champion of prisoners and working people, and anyone who'd ever felt society's judgment. He starts performing at prisons, actual prisons, long before it becomes the iconic moment everyone remembers. But the song also haunts him. People assume he's been to prison. They assume he killed someone. Cash, who'd never spent a night in jail at this point in his life, finds himself defined by a fiction he created. In interviews years later, Cash would explain the line about shooting a man in Reno. He said he needed the worst reason imaginable for murder, something that would convey pure moral emptiness. Just to watch him die was that reason. It was unforgettable because it was unforgivable. The song becomes a staple of his live shows. Every time he performs it, he inhabits that prisoner. He closes his eyes, his voice drops into that dark register, and for 3 minutes, he's not Johnny Cash the star. He's that man in Folsom, listening to the train, drowning in regret. If this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling the weight of what Cash did with this song, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these stories, these moments when art and truth collided. January 13, 1968, Folsom State Prison, California. Johnny Cash, now a massive star, walks into the prison cafeteria to perform a live concert. This isn't a publicity stunt. Cash has been performing in prisons for years, driven by something deeper than career strategy, driven perhaps by that song he wrote overnight 13 years earlier. The prisoners file in, hardened men in a maximum security facility. Many of them are serving life sentences. They've seen celebrity visitors before, performers who treat them like curiosities, who perform their sanitized hits and leave feeling charitable. Cash walks on stage dressed entirely in black. He picks up his guitar, and he starts with Folsom Prison Blues. The room erupts. These men know this song. They've lived this song. When Cash sings "I Shot a Man in Reno Just to Watch Him Die," the prisoners roar their approval. It's not because they're glorifying violence. It's because someone, finally, has told their truth without flinching. Someone has seen them not as monsters, but as men who made terrible choices and have to live with them. The recording of this concert at Folsom Prison becomes one of the best-selling country albums of all time. That live version of Folsom Prison Blues, with the prisoners' raw, visceral reactions, becomes definitive. You can hear the catharsis in their voices, the recognition, the painful acknowledgement of what they've lost. Folsom Prison Blues transforms country music's possibilities. After Cash, artists like Merle Haggard, who actually had been in prison, find audiences ready to hear their stories. The outlaw country movement of the 1970s, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, traces its DNA directly to what Cash did with this song. Cash continues performing in prisons throughout his life. He becomes an advocate for prison reform, speaking to Congress, using his platform to highlight the humanity of incarcerated people. That song, written overnight, becomes a lifelong commitment. In his final years, when illness has ravaged his body and his voice is a shadow of its former power, Cash still performs Folsom Prison Blues. It's become inseparable from who he is. The man in black, the voice of the voiceless, the artist who looked at America's shadows and refused to turn away. Sometimes the most important art comes from the places we're afraid to go. Cash didn't write Folsom Prison Blues because he thought it would be commercially successful. He wrote it because Sam Phillips rejected what was safe, and Cash, in his desperation and honesty, reached for something true. That truth, uncomfortable and uncompromising, changed everything. It proved that country music could be more than escapism. It could be witness. It could be conscience. It could speak for those who'd lost their voice. If this story moved you, if you understand now why this song mattered, share it. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the moments that changed music history. And remember, the art that scares you to create might be exactly what the world needs to hear. Johnny Cash proved that one night in Memphis, and country music has never been the same.